5.
Broncos. People may forget this, but in that divisional round loss to the Patriots, they were missing Bo Nix, their number one back, J.K. Dobbins, and their number 2 and 3 wide receivers. They were banged up at the end of the year. The NFL, as you well know, is a league of attrition, and they just picked a bad week to be playing in the divisional round. Team won 14 games. They don't allow sacks, and yet they led the NFL in sacks. I don't think that changes. Great head coaching, great line play. Denver at 5.
The Denver Broncos have experienced a relatively quiet offseason in terms of the conversations surrounding them, which stands in stark contrast to the period following the Bo Nix draft selection. A couple of years ago, when they made that pick, I was producing content about them constantly. My enthusiasm for Bo Nix and the Broncos was through the roof. That excitement carried through the entire season. Heading into the following year, they made concrete moves in free agency, particularly strengthening the defense. And there was this overwhelming belief that Nix would take another step forward. All of that momentum carried seamlessly into the next offseason. Then the season itself unfolded, and the Broncos were controversial from the very beginning. They really were. The bizarre games against Tennessee and Indianapolis set a tone. Their campaign was genuinely the gift that kept on giving. You had some of the most insane, spectacular, wildest moments in recent NFL history, particularly involving that one player against the New York Giants. Then you had games that left you scratching your head, trying to find a positive spin, wondering if it was just one of those days. Whether against the Raiders or the Jets, there was always something to discuss. That momentum carried through the entire season. Then came the playoffs and the controversial victory over Buffalo, which was wildly exciting, one of the most thrilling playoff games in quite some time. And then Bo Nix got hurt. When I say controversial in that context, I don't mean it in a negative sense. But Nix's injury was disheartening, depressing, a genuine bummer. Yet even then, there was still a sense they could win against New England. That game turned into one of the craziest weather games imaginable. Colin claimed it was the most extreme weather game he had ever witnessed. He doesn't typically make statements like that randomly. He's strategic about those claims. He's been around the block. He's watched plenty of football. That tells you something about how dramatic and bizarre that contest was. The Broncos still could have won, but they didn't. Nix was injured, and then things just flattened out. I was recently cleaning up some saved images I use for content, deciding what to keep and what to delete. I came across one and thought, I've shown this enough, I should probably delete it. When am I going to use it again? Then I realized it's only March. Nick Wright will probably say something crazy and bash Bo Nix eventually. Something will come up. I couldn't bring myself to delete it. All the other images I could potentially use are gone, except the ones I literally use daily. But this one matters too much. The last game we saw Bo Nix play was his best game. When you look at important contests where the Broncos needed him to be great, whether against Kansas City, Green Bay, or Buffalo, he was awesome. Not just in individual moments, but in must-have situations, Nix delivered. He has foundational accomplishments, accolades, however you want to define them. When you have all of that working in your favor, but there are no dramatic headlines about trading first-round picks for star players, the perception can be that momentum isn't building. But the momentum has already been built. It's already there. Some teams need external momentum building through splashy moves. The Broncos simply do not. Their biggest change is essentially switching play callers, and how that will look in practice is anyone's guess at this point. That alone I find genuinely interesting and intriguing. Sometimes with certain coaches, you have to trust what others say because they're actually on the front lines with them. They have a better understanding than we can possibly have from the outside. With some play callers, especially those who were head coaches in college or coordinators elsewhere, you can form opinions. It's easier to evaluate someone like Ben Johnson with Detroit than, say, a quarterback's coach from another team. You have to trust the people who are actually in the building, who know the conversations being had, who understand what type of offense this coach wants to run. You have to trust a little more than you might want to. That's the situation the Broncos are facing with Sean Payton. How much influence does he have on the offense? What does the game plan look like? How does this all actually work? I'm not going to try predicting that right now because it would all be made up, honestly. I'd rather talk about what actually matters. This team is already great. This team is already awesome. They've shown incredible resilience, and at the most important position, their quarterback Bo Nix is seemingly getting a better play caller, perhaps a more intimate relationship with his offensive coordinator at this stage of his development. That will be beneficial. Nix has already been getting better and better in the biggest, most important moments. Now he's entering year 3. He's way more comfortable. He's way more resilient. The fact that last season had rocky moments, that he missed some throws, that he was sometimes too sped up, that's amazing. That's awesome. That's how you grow. You grow from your laundry list of failures. You don't grow from your wins. You don't grow from your high points. You can build confidence from successes. You can build belief, no doubt about it. Success adds clarity to what's possible, but growth comes from failure. That's where resilience originates. If every video I made from day 1 got 100,000 views, where is the growth? I'd have confidence that my content performs, and that's a great problem to have. I'd rather have inflated confidence and keep producing successful videos. But when you make something that nobody watches, or that straight up fails, you have to ask what went wrong. What do I need to do differently? When you have a balance of successes and failures, when you succeed and then fail or encounter problems, you have a clearer picture of everything. You don't really have clarity if all you do is win, 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 no matter what. You just don't. There continues to be more and more clarity and development from Nix. He now knows without a shadow of a doubt. No matter how much belief you have, you still need to know. There's a difference between wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom is doing, knowledge is knowing. Bo Nix has been able to experience. We saw what he did against Buffalo and Josh Allen in the fourth quarter and over time. He always believed he could do that, no doubt. But now he knows he can do that. He also has the wisdom of his failures, the struggles of last season, and the season before that. All of this creates a much more balanced version of Bo Nix, and therefore fundamentally a better team. It's interesting because people still don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in him. I'm fascinated to see what happens when all the quarterback lists start coming out. It's always a free-for-all with random voices. First things first, we'll cite someone from some obscure blog claiming Nix is a top 3 quarterback. Then you have the main voices like Sims and others. I'm genuinely interested to see where Nix lands because nobody was confident in him last season. The general media wasn't. Then he played brilliantly in the playoffs. He had individual brilliant games against Kansas City and others. Even someone like Nick Wright, after the Kansas City game, said it was the best game Nix ever played. Then after Buffalo, he said that was the best game Nix ever played. If we take those as true statements, then he's playing his best games in the most important contests, and he's playing his best games more regularly. That's what I mean by momentum building. Not only does he have that experience, that resume, that track record of failures and successes, but he's also just growing and evolving as a quarterback independent of all that. Combined with potentially improved coaching, someone who can focus more specifically on his development, and you're looking at a recipe for ascension. The Broncos could absolutely find themselves in a position where they're an elite top team, yet still face the yeah but skepticism that followed them last year. People called them the weakest number 1 seed. Didn't Alex Smith say something to that effect? I think I made a whole video about it. Then there were takes suggesting Nix wasn't really that important to the Broncos. Nick and Danny argued that losing their quarterback would be less detrimental for Denver compared to teams like New England. Then we saw what that actually looked like. And it wasn't the best-case scenario. It wasn't good. How these conversations continue to unfold will be interesting. I don't imagine people will suddenly start believing in the Broncos. I suspect it might feel like Groundhog Day, except Nix has the potential to shatter that narrative. He can force people to acknowledge a new era in Denver. That shift starts and stops with his consistency and level of play. If there's consistency and increased performance, the Broncos become unavoidable. It becomes impossible to ignore because there would now be a long enough track record. Think about Sam Darnold. People didn't buy into Seattle. They won the Super Bowl, and people still weren't saying week after week that they were the best team. There were always caveats. Well, I'd still rather have Baker Mayfield. Any quarterback could win with that roster. Similar things were said about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles. That skepticism persisted because of track record. At this point, if Nix's track record becomes great, even greater, then it's harder to maintain that resistance. I'm sure some will try, but it becomes more difficult to argue against. Colin has the Broncos top 5 after free agency, obviously not factoring in the draft or schedule. That's fascinating because there isn't external momentum building with Denver, yet there's still an insane amount of internal momentum. Considering they were in the AFC Championship last year and lost largely because their starting quarterback wasn't playing, The fact that they're not at the top of most people's lists of greatness is pretty interesting. Those are my thoughts on the Denver Broncos. I'm curious about yours. How do you see their upcoming season? How do you think the perception of who they are should look right now? Because that's really what we're discussing with a lot of these conversations. Colin's top 10 lists and similar content are all about perception versus predictions. I lean more toward examining perception in March, rather than making firm predictions, because predictions this early feel silly to me. In this moment, I find perception most fascinating, especially tracking how January performances influence discussions in February, March, and beyond. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single response, whether agreement or disagreement drives your perspective. Let's generate meaningful discussion, perhaps even productive disagreement, while maintaining enjoyment in the conversation. Please consider subscribing if you appreciate this content. We're developing a community that I hope feels genuinely connected and invested. Your participation matters enormously. Remember to like this video as it supports visibility and algorithmic reach. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next discussion.